Okay, great. Hi. So I'm Dr. Morgan Camp here. Very pleased today to have as my guest Stephen Wright. Stephen Wright's a medical engineer, graduate of Kalish Functional Medicine Institute. Stephen's a long-term colleague, a long-term friend of mine, and an expert in gut health. And I'm very happy to have him here today to interview him and talk more about his experience with gut health, some of his products that he has with Healthy Gut LLC. And and I also just want to hear about Stephen's experiences and share with some of his secrets and tips around GI health, and especially around the connection between gut health, GI health, and mood disorders, anxiety, depression, etc. And welcome, Stephen. So glad to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Camp. Thanks for having me.
So, Stephen, I know you've got a long history in gut health, and and your story is quite interesting. So I know people would like to hear it a bit. So would you like to share a little bit about yourself and tell us how you came into this field and made this your passion in your career?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the abbreviated version. But I had issues since birth, and I grew up in the time period where antibiotics were handed out for every sniffle. So I got a lot of antibiotics, and then I had 4 years straight of antibiotics from a dermatologist for acne. And so I have all kinds of risk factors. I had quite a stressful and gluten-filled college life. And so by the time I graduated college, I was having IBS every single day. I was alternating constipation, diarrhea. I was having bloating and gas. And I finally got my sort of dream job. I was going to go be a consultant at a Big Four accounting firm in Chicago and work in a high rise. And so from a small town boy to this Chicago big city life, working on the 17th floor, it was pretty cool. And so I was in my dream job. And unfortunately, at this point, I was trying to take back control of my health. I was trying to lose the weight. I was about 245. I was still having acne. And for the first time in my life, I was having some pretty severe depression, as well as now some panic attacks, which I had never experienced before. And so I was doing like lettuce and chicken every day. I was working out for an hour a day in the morning, and I was like just trying to lose the weight, trying to get this under control. And I was having this bloating that no matter if I ate lettuce and chicken or beer and burgers with a client, I would bloat up, and the bloating would be so bad that I would basically cry a little. I would softly cry at my desk. And then if you've ever had what's called visceral hypersensitivity, the pain is so bad that really the only thing you want is to fart, because you need the pressure to reduce inside your abdomen so the pain goes away. And so unfortunately, if you've ever been that bloated, that it's not just one fart and it all goes away. So, I could only crop dust the office so many times before everybody was mad at me. And of course I had to still get work done. So I can't just spend my entire day in the bathroom. So this led my boss to pulling me aside and telling me that I was a stinky guy in the office. And I mean, this was a wake-up call for me. There was lots of other really embarrassing stories of, around dates and buses and things like that. But this was the big wake-up call. And I tried to seek medical attention from Western medicine, and they basically screened me for celiac disease and ruled that out. And then found out I had a family history of IBS. And so they basically said, look, this is kind of like your life sentence. You should eat more whole grains, take Metamucil, and you can have as many antibiotics as you'd like. And I was already anti-antibiotic at that point in time, not because I knew anything about what the long-term damage was, but I knew that because of the 4 years of taking them, I woke up in the hospital because my gut was so wrecked at that moment that I was all I had was bifidobacter growing in there. So anyways, I was anti them for other reasons that we now know is a good idea. So I didn't really know what to do. Luckily, I had a really good friend from college who had celiac disease, who started a diet called the specific carbohydrate diet after he failed the gluten-free diet. And this saved his life. And he was like, look, man, you're going to have to make every meal from home. You cannot eat out. You cannot eat any processed ingredients, and you got to eat this very bland diet, and that'll fix you. And I was like, okay, I don't want to do this at all, but I'll try it because the pain is so bad. My job's in jeopardy, et cetera. And within the first week of changing my diet, like 50% of the bloating pain was gone, and I was hooked. I was like, okay, I can do things that change my experience. And I was trained in electrical engineering, which is basically just problem solving things you don't quite understand or can't see and touch. So all I have to do is find other people like me who had similar issues and reverse engineer what they did, and I'll be able to figure out my stuff. And so that was, that was 2009. So it's been many years. And, I think just my natural propensity for curiosity and taking substances to try to figure things out and try to get ahead in life has led us all the way to here, which has included a couple, like 400K on my own stuff and lots of failed treatments, both Western and Eastern, as well as lots of successes.
Thanks for sharing, Stephen. That's quite a story. Quite a story. Quite a few embarrassments there, huh? I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to that. I certainly can. Would you mind sharing some of those treatment? It sounds like you've been through a little bit of everything, and I know you've come up with some great treatments, which we're going to talk about today. Some of your treatments and some of the products you have, but what all have you tried? Because I think a lot of listeners. I think a lot of people out there try a lot of things, and it's so hard out there when you don't really who to trust now, what information is true, where to find good information, what practitioners can you trust, et cetera. These are questions I face every day in my own health issues, as well as, trying to find solutions for my clients and for difficult to treat clients as well. So could you share a little bit about that process for us?
Yeah, sure. So, I think we should at least maybe group different types of treatments together. So we have like dietary interventions, we have supplemental interventions, we have drug interventions. I would say that we have I don't know what we want to call it, but like neurological, or not neurological, but like sort of energy/neurology interventions, stuff that's not really explainable, but it could include neurofeedback, biofeedback, or just, energy work, things like that. And then there's, I think, root cause interventions. And so I think the inconvenient truth is that for hard cases like myself, people with a really long history of issues who do not respond right away to a dietary intervention and a supplemental intervention, you're probably going to need to do an intervention or more, maybe multiples in every single one of those categories. And so, for myself in the beginning in 2009, 2010, there was this massive movement towards change your diet, change your life. The diet is the foundation of healing. You can rebuild everything that's wrong with you and fix everything that's wrong with you by just changing your diet. And so for a while, for 3 to 4 years, I really focused on nutrition and supplements. And I thought that I could get back to like a really, really healthy version of myself, very resilient, able to eat lots of foods, able to deal with stresses in my life by just dietary intervention and supplemental intervention. And I failed. I tried, it wasn't a dietary issue. I tried like 40 different diets, and some of them helped me more than others. But at the end of the day, diet only gets you so far. Same thing with supplements. They can only get you so far.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me, Stephen, because I do hear that story quite a lot with people, and I hear people their diet's 99% perfect from what, most people would say is ideal, and yet they want to make more changes. And, I'm always encouraging, well, maybe there's something we're missing. What is missing? And, I think you're getting to that, in your story a little bit with what are those root causes, what happens when you take antibiotics for 40 years, for example, what does that do to our intestinal health? And, and then how do you get out of that? Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was the massive breakthrough for me. Now, don't get me wrong, switching my diet, and basically the specific carbohydrate diet is a version of an elimination diet that's focused around restricting processed foods and all grains and certain types of carbohydrates. But by finding the foods that worked with me and eliminating the foods that didn't, step by step, that totally changed my life. And it was helpful, but it did not take away the acne. It didn't take away the hormone disruptions. I was still having anxiety, depression. I was still having some alternating IBS-like issues. And then I added in things like stomach acid support through betaine HCL, which we'll talk more about later. I added in some enzymes that were available. I cycled through all the enzymes I could find at the time. Those were somewhat helpful. You know, I started taking things like vitamin D and fish oil. Like as I learned, I would start layering these things in, like magnesium, things like this. And that totally gave me another 20, 30, 40% improvement. But I was still, and then I would plateau and I was totally stuck. And the big breakthrough for me was the root cause analysis, to basically start to ask the question, okay, well, what is keeping me stuck here? You know? And so from there, luckily I worked with a mutual friend of ours, Dan Kalish, and Dan found some parasites. He also helped me with some neurotransmitter imbalances. I have a history of like 7 to 9 concussions. And so I had to seek some other people who helped me with some hormone imbalances. I had too much estrogen. So it was sort of like more tests just to like say like, okay, why? Like, how is the liver doing? How is the gut doing? How is the hormones doing? And basically step by step, as I sort of like killed off the H. pylori and killed off the Indolamax nana. And I did a round of antifungals that seemed to help, even though I didn't have a test result for that. And so as I went through these things, I just kind of kept gaining ground, getting back to, you know, closer to what I thought health was. And so I think most people's journey who are more of a tough case like myself is going to include, you know, that diet, that supplementation. That's going to, you know, you'll probably forget how bad you were if you do that part right, but you probably won't be able to eat dairy and eggs and go out to restaurants and have a glass of wine every once in a while. Like you'll still have some restrictions and you'll still kind of be in a box. Maybe you'll have some IBS like symptoms whenever you get stressed or whenever that time of the month comes, or whatever it might be, whatever your issues. Maybe the anxiety will flare up or the depression will flare up at certain times. And so getting to those next higher states of resilient health, I think typically you have to kind of go through the body step by step and just check each part.
Beautiful. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, that's what I find in my practice, you know, just going through everything, you know, in many ways, you know, people always ask what I do. And in many ways, the answer is very simple. I just look at every organ, every tissue, everything I can find and test. And if there's a problem with it, I want to bring it back to equilibrium and bring it back to the best possible functioning it can. And especially if you're continuing to have symptoms. And for some people, you're right, you know, they don't usually make it into my office or in front of you either, you know, if they get better just with a simple dietary change. But yeah, it's often that deeper level of treatment that's required to bring a deeper level of healing and resiliency. Since you brought it up, so your anxiety and panic attacks, how did that progress as you were working through diet changes and supplementation? And what was that link and correlation for you? And at what point did you start noticing a more of a massive improvement in those symptoms versus, you know, just minor changes necessarily? Yeah.
Well, I would say when I was at my sickest, like when I was objectively having the most gut issues, like not only in the toilet, but the bloating and all that stuff. When I was at my worst version of my own gut health, I had the most mental struggles. So that's when I was having the panic attacks. That's when I was in a really, really dark depression for like 8 or 9 months. I don't know that I would classify it as anxiety back then, but it definitely was it as well. And so I was most vulnerable, I think, mentally when I was in the worst shape digestively. And as the digestion got better, my emotional swings and my anxiety depression swings, the volatility decreased. So the stronger my gut got, the less gut symptoms I had, the worse the swings were mentally. And I stopped at some point, I don't know when, but the panic attacks just kind of never really happened again at some point. And that was early on, actually. The panic attacks were the last thing to come when I was like having the worst gut health ever. they were kind of like a new thing I had never experienced before. At first I didn't even know what was happening. I just knew that everything was kind of fading out, and I had to sit down on a park bench, and I was like, what is going on? This is not like, am I dying? I don't know what's happening. That all kind of came on late, and then kind of went away sooner. But the swings of the depression, anxiety, they kept going for many years. But the better I got my overall body health, the less intensity they had. And then I would say now I still deal with anxiety. I don't really deal with depression other than moodiness. I do identify as being a highly sensitive individual with a lot of moods. In fact, I have more moods than my soon-to-be wife in general. And so I do, like yesterday, I was kind of melancholy. But in the past, I would make that mean things, and it might last an entire week or something. And yesterday it was just like, well, I guess I'm kind of a little depressed today. I'm kind of a little sad about all the stress that's happening, and the fact that I'm in a hotel room and not in our house and all of these things. But today I don't feel that at all.
Beautiful, beautiful. And with all of the latest and greatest buzzwords out there in the gut health industry and all the diagnoses that one can get, what do you correlate mood disorders, depression, anxiety with on a chemical level or on a more molecular level? Like do you have a necessarily framework for how you see your history of mood disorders? And I know this is out of the blue. We didn't talk about this in advance, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot, Stephen. What comes to mind for me is like histamine release, and other hormonal changes that are potentially causing, depression and anxiety with this. And just curious as to your perspective on that. Yeah.
I mean, I think that is the frustrating part about a lot of the issues in both the skin and the brain, is that they can have so many causes. And so you're right. If your hormones are just totally out of whack, for whether you're male or female, or you're, perimenopausal, menopausal, like, just those hormone swings alone can drive you batty, literally. There's a huge amount of women who actually are sort of triggered into a psychosis a bit when they have too much drop in progesterone, estrogen during menopause. So like, you can look that up. That's a real phenomenon in psychiatry. And we do know that a leaky gut usually equals a leaky brain. And so if you have inflammation chronically happening in the gut, if you struggle with dairy or grain breakdown, there are proteins and certain types of foods that can go right from the gut and trigger experiences in the brain, whether those are pleasurable experiences to negative experiences. And so though there are neuroinflammation issues coming from the gut, as well as just gut mediated problems that tend to just drag down your entire life. Like, it's just like a dark cloud following you around that like causes these types of issues. Or people that like are refractory on like normal things for anxiety, like almost guaranteed there's a gut component. And so I kind of see them as there's like a gut immune hormone brain sort of. I guess that's a full square there. It's not a triangle, but those are the things I think about when I think about like, how do we have a resilient, healthy mental state? Is you gotta make sure that each one of those quadrants is working really well in order to get the brain and the mental state to be resilient, solid, stable.
Perfect. Yeah. So just to summarize what I'm hearing, balanced hormones, lowering leaky gut and stopping intestinal inflammation, which is also correlating with leaky, blood-brain barrier and neurological inflammation, and working also on the mast cell activation, histamine reaction that a lot of people get as well, right? So working on all of those to produce a more solid individual, so to speak. Because we could, for example, go through and look at what I could go through and look through. So for example, with you had high estrogen, that's going to cause all kinds of mood disorders. If you're allergic to foods and eating processed foods and sensitivities, for sure, that's going to drive neurological inflammation, which is going to drive panic attacks and anxiety for sure. You're going to we also going to get mineral vitamin deficiencies from the leaky gut and the GI inflammation. And that's going to lead to, just magnesium deficiency alone, leading to fatigue, anxiety, panic, etc., insomnia. Yeah. So
I had low stomach acid and low enzymes, which I believe reduces your capacity to absorb amino acids. And if you don't have your amino acids, you're not going to make your neurotransmitters, let alone repair whatever cells may be damaged in the process of all this inflammation. So I think there's a high correlation amongst low stomach acid and mood disorders. And I think it's just one of those things where if you have low stomach acid for 5-10 years, you're on PPIs, you're on all these chemically induced low stomach acid, your ability to absorb amino acids is significantly dropping.
Right. Tell us more about that, Stephen. That's because we all hear, everybody hears they got heartburn, too much stomach acid, they need to take Prilosec or something like that to lower stomach acid. So yeah, tell us more about this topic. And because it's fascinating how pretty much everything we watch on TV and hear from mainstream doctors is kind of the opposite of what is actually happening underneath the hood, so to speak.
Yeah, well, there was a really clever marketing campaign. I mean, look, there's a real issue here. I think it's like 70 million Americans have heartburn at least once a week. Like, I mean, this is like
million.
I think so. Yeah. Wow. And I've had heartburn. I have a history of heartburn. And like, I know what it's like to try to be sleeping and have heartburn, and you cannot sleep. I mean, it tastes terrible. You don't want to kiss anybody. You're afraid. You're like, what is this doing? It's totally uncomfortable. I once was dating a woman who went to the hospital twice. She thought she was having a heart issue, and it was just heartburn. So some people's version of heartburn can feel like an actual heart condition, if you will, a heart attack. So I'm not saying that heartburn it does not deserve to be the pain reduced or gotten rid of. I do agree with that. But there was a class of medications and there's just acid lowering substances that take the pain away very quickly like this. And so I think in the culture we're in, that was an easy sell then, because I'm in pain and you say, hey, take this, the pain goes away. You're like, cool, that's great. Unfortunately, there was no real consideration for the actual physiology of how the body works. And the actual physiology is that the body needs that acid to do a number of things. One is kill lipopolysaccharides coming from your saliva and kill any bugs and germs on your food that you're intaking or in your water. Another thing is the acid has to be strong enough to essentially liquefy the food that you don't chew up. And even the food you do chew up, like if you think about a walnut, take a walnut in your hand and try to crush it. Most people can't even, the walnut's going to win. And then you throw that in your mouth, you chop that walnut into like 16 little walnuts. Now your stomach's the one that's got to liquefy that. Like that's a pretty big job. It's a pretty cool organ. And the beautiful thing and the weird thing is that actually you have enzymes and stuff trying to attack your food to break it into really, really small molecules that your body can absorb and use. Well, the acid actually allows proteins to unfold, and that allows enzymes and pepsin and other things to be able to attack it. Without the acid being strong enough, the protein structures kind of stay stuck together and everything's kind of nibbling on the outside. And so you end up with this protein loss if your acid is not strong enough. And then lastly, your stomach acid, the pH, the strength of your stomach acid sets the pacing for the rest of the digestive process. It's sort of like the timer on how fast or how slow things move. And so there are a number of other things that dictate the speed of your digestion, whether you have loose stools or constipation. But one of the biggest things and the first big domino to fall as far as go too fast or you go too slow is your stomach acid. And so unfortunately, we have this experience as a human. It's like, oh my gosh, I have heartburn, I have pain, I want out of it. I take this acid reducing over-the-counter drug or prescription or whatever, no more pain. But now we have all these studies showing that your incidence of osteoporosis, your incidence of SIBO, your incidence of brain disorders later, it's like every body part is affected if you stay on these acid suppressing drugs for long enough. Some people lose B12, all kinds of things. And so we know that because of that research and because we've been using these drugs for 20 years, we now have enough data to basically show that stomach acid is like crazy critical for long-term health. And if we suppress it chemically, you do pay the price at some point. And so, in fact, a lot of people actually would get the same relief from these substances with a acid supporting supplement, like a beta and HCl. And that's where it's very counterintuitive. You're feeling acid, and I'm saying you should actually take more acid through a pill form or something like that, and it will also alleviate your pain. And that's actually true for those people who do have low stomach acid, which is the majority of people who are tested who have heartburn. But it's just a bit of a harder sell. It's more complex of a story.
Much more complex of a story. And we as a society like simple medical stories, right? Simple solutions and a simple pill to take.
Yeah, and the reason, just to tie it all together, the reason why the heartburn typically is happening, not every time, but typically, is because if you have low acid, your food, the bottom of your stomach doesn't open until the acid hits like 1 or 1.5 or so on the pH scale. It starts around 3 or 4, and you're dropping down. And as it gets more acidic, then the bottom of the stomach opens. Well, if it doesn't get that, if it stays at like a 3 because you have low stomach acid, the food is just chilling in your stomach. You feel extra full. And then basically it starts to ferment. There's a microbiome in your stomach. There's a microbiome everywhere. There's a skin biome, a nose biome, a stomach biome. And those bugs just start to have a party. And the thing that they give off is gas. They ferment. That gas can't go down because the stomach's not opening. So it has to come up, which is up your esophagus. Every time you're burping that stuff up or opening, there's a chance for a little acid to, hit your esophagus tissue or come up a little bit. And so the experience is still the same. The causation is different. In this case, it's because the fermentation in the gas is pushing open the top of your stomach because it's unwilling to go through the bottom, because the bottom cells are like, hey, you don't meet their criteria. You can't come here yet. And so that's where taking more acid would actually lower the pH, allowing it to go down into your small intestine. It would also reduce the ability for the fermentation, which would reduce the gas coming out and the opening of your sphincter at the top of the stomach there.
Perfect. So what I'm hearing, to summarize, symptoms of low stomach acid, for which people could benefit a lot from taking stomach acids. And remind me again, what is the name of your product, Stephen? Your stomach acid products?
HCL Guard.
HCL Guard, exactly. And there's a few other ingredients in there too, which I want to hear about. But belching, sluggish digestion leading to, just delayed, or more like constipation is not the right word, but just sluggish, slowed digestion. What I see on people's lab results: low B12, depression, anxiety, heartburn. Am I missing anything else there, Stephen?
No, that's a pretty a lot.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. Yeah, and what other ingredients do you have in the HCL Guard? I think there's deglycerized licorice in there, correct?
Yep, deglycerized licorice. We have organic ginger root, and then we add intrinsic factor as well as pepsin. And so if you look at most of the rest of the beta and HCL products on the market will include pepsin, which is a really important protein degrading enzyme that's found in your stomach, which is great. But we are the only company that I'm aware of that also includes intrinsic factor, which is basically the bouncer that grabs onto B12 and helps it through the lining of the intestine. So it's very important for B12. And so there is data on what's called pernicious anemia through PPI use, which is anemia due to low B12 status. There's also data on using PPIs for multi-years, and I think it's around 3 to 5% of people will end up with low B12 status, which you and I know that if it's low for conventional medicine, that means, for integrative and functional medicine, we're typically using a much higher range, so that percentage of people could be may double, triple higher. I don't know. So the intrinsic factor helps with the B12, and then the ginger helps with the prokinetic waves coming out of the bottom of the stomach. It's also just naturally anti-inflammatory for people with stomach things. So it's kind of like one of those things where, if you had an upset tummy as a child, maybe your grandmother made you ginger tea or something like that. Like it's a long time remedy for upset tummy. Part of the reason why is there's some data on humans where they took organic ginger root and the bottom of the stomach made stronger prokinetic waves, which is really cool. So that's why we put that in there. And then diglycerated licorice root, the deglycinated part means that they took out the part that basically would make your blood pressure go higher. So don't worry about that. But what DGL does is it helps heal the mucous membranes inside the stomach, which are often inflamed or upset if you have low stomach acid.
And I'm assuming those inflamed mucosal lining is also what's causing some of the pain, discomfort, and likely leading to some of the leaky gut symptoms too, right?
Yeah, it's all connected.
I love DGL. I use it a lot personally and give it a lot to clients. And I've been using it for years with great results, and love your HCL Guard. I've been taking it myself for a while, and have quite a few patients who really enjoy taking it, Stephen. Yeah, to reiterate what point that you made there, and that you can't really emphasize this enough in our world of fatigue, brain fog, and dementia, Alzheimer's, et cetera, there is no more critical nutrient than B12, in my opinion. And I've treated so many people, thousands of people with B12 shots and different types of B12, just because they had underlying intestinal issues and we gave them B12 while we were working on their intestines, just so they could have a better quality of life while fixing the underlying root cause there. So I do encourage people, get those B12 levels checked. If it's below, 550 on a blood test or so, I'd like to, see it up there. Whereas, like you were saying, mainstream medicine calls 200, 250, the lower end of normal. I like to see it 500, 550, 600 personally for most of my clients. Also, Stephen, you mentioned low enzymes. So tell us a bit about enzymes, and you have your product HoloZymes. It's a unique product. I've also been using that personally for a while. I love it. It's for me, I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with it. I find it's very good for just keeping myself regular. It helps keep my bloating down, helps keep inflammation down in the intestinal tract. I have a little more if my diet strays, if I'm eating out more, if I have to have processed foods, or if I'm traveling, et cetera, I definitely have more then. But would love to hear more about, digestive enzymes from your perspective, and what makes HoloZymes unique, because I know there's a lot of unique qualities to it that our listeners would like to hear about, Steve.
Yeah. So, I mean, digestive enzymes are super critical. Like you mentioned, like the work that I do and the work that I focus on is sure, if you're having heartburn, loose stools, constipation, things like this, bloating, gas, life is probably not as enjoyable as it could be, and you want to get rid of those issues. So the interesting thing and how it dovetails to the work that you do is that gut is often tied directly into all kinds of neurological issues. I think that's why they use the ketogenic diet with not autism, but with seizure disorders oftentimes. So like what's happening in the gut is often happening in the brain and vice versa. So if you have the ability to make your gut better, then I don't know that science can totally explain it yet, and I can't totally explain it yet, but typically there's a correlative event over the next coming 3 to 6 months where your brain gets better. And it may not be 1-to-1, but it's typically part of the journey. And so enzymes are a huge part of that, because your enzymes are what actually extract the nutrients from the food and get it down to the right size for you to absorb it into your body. Most people don't conceptualize this enough. They don't really think about it, but like your gut is a no to anything that's not the right size. And it's not like just because I ate it, I got it. Like it might just go to the toilet, or it might go to other bugs who could eat it. If you don't get it down to the appropriate carbohydrate structure size or the appropriate amino acid size, your intestine does not take it up. It just keeps on bouncing along right on through you. And so when we look at what happens around even end of life, like going 60 plus, how you basically start malabsorbing nutrients as you age due to loss of gut function, and you get frail, you have osteoporosis risk, you have all these extra issues just from lack of nutrients. And so that could be happening though when you're 20, 30, 40, 50. It doesn't have to just happen when you're older. And part of the cause of that can be a low enzyme function due to all kinds of reasons, particularly due to the fact that you have 3 different types of enzymes. You have pancreatic enzymes, you have brush border enzymes, and you have microbiome enzymes. And so if you're wondering, how would I know if I have an enzyme issue? Well, number one is you might have a bunch of nutrient deficiencies. So if you work with a functional integrative medical doctor and you find out like, holy cow, I'm low in almost every mineral or nutrient, like that's a pretty good sign. But number 2 would be like bloating and gas and food sensitivities. Like those are like the 3 like pretty much hallmarks of somebody does not have enough enzyme function on board, and they're going to struggle even with the simplest elimination diet. Like we're talking just meats and vegetables, they can still just struggle. And I think that's where the FODMAP diet has taken off for digestive conditions, is a lot of times is a lack of enzyme function in some cases. And so you can take extra enzymes to, number one, assure that like that organic wild caught food you're working so hard and paying so much money for actually gets broken down and absorbed. But 2, if you have these gas, bloating, heartburn, these types of issues, taking enzymes can really significantly improve those symptoms in most cases. So that's where, I would say the majority of doctors actually know that, including regular medical doctors are taught this. The issue is, at least for myself, I knew this as well. I tried like 50 different brands. I couldn't figure out which one worked the best. Like various doctors, all kinds of doctors would tell me to take, well, are you taking your enzymes? Yeah, I'm taking my enzymes. I'm still bloated. I'm still gassy. I still can't eat dairy. I still can't do these other things. And so, but people just keep going, right? They just check it off the list. Okay, they're taking enzymes, keep going. What I found out was that not all enzymes are created equal. And part of that has to do with the fact that enzymes need a mineral cofactor to basically turn on and work. And so this frustrated me as an engineer, as a person who needs enzymes so I don't get bloated. I don't want to pay for products that only work a quarter of the time or a third of the time. And I want to be able to eat what I want to eat. I'm not trying to live my life in a box and not ever go to a restaurant or not ever travel. And so when I was creating Healthy Gut, when I was creating these products, I wanted to create the best enzyme product in the world that would actually work. And so I ended up finding a PhD researcher who specializes in enzymes, and he filed a patent on basically the perfect mineral cofactor to turn the enzyme on and make it work. And like all good people out there, he had a really great story about why his was different. And I'm always just the guinea pig. I'm like, sure, cool. I'm sure you have the miracle. I'll try it. But this time it actually worked. And I was like, whoa, this is working. I can eat tortilla chips and, I can have a few glasses of wine and not have loose stools in the morning. This is pretty amazing. And so I actually went back and sort of double checked his patent, double checked his biochemical analysis, and found out that I think he was actually true all along. Unfortunately, not that many people had listened to him. So we went ahead and licensed the product, and then we souped it up with some extra digestive enzymes that people with digestive conditions tend to lack, to really help with breaking down of your cruciferous vegetables, your FODMAPs, things like that. And so that's HoloZymes.
And those last things you mentioned, Stephen, those aren't normally found in most digestive enzymes, correct? So,
Correct.
You're mostly you're not getting those extra enzymes there. You're not getting those bonuses that you're getting in HoloZymes. So 1, it's not, most enzymes aren't activated properly. And 2, you're giving the bonus brush border enzymes and such, which help with additional breakdown of additional carbohydrates and additional protein or additional foods. Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. One of the things I really like about, as a physician saying, it's that it's coming from my perspective, I'm very detail oriented. I like to give people exactly what they need. So I very rarely recommend everybody should go take this or go take that or go take this. This is one exception to that for me, Stephen, because I see that, pretty much everybody eating processed food that we have in our country laden with so much just crap in the food supply. I think everybody needs enzymes, and almost everybody I see needs Pepsin HCL as well. What's your experience with that? And what's your experience with seeing people take this for the long term? And what kind of benefits do you see people taking this for long term? And are there any safety risks taking it for the long term?
So, just email me or reach out to me if anybody finds a theory even for this, because I've been searching for many years. I haven't found even a theory, let alone true pathophysiology or anything like that. But there is no risk that I can find yet around taking extra enzymes and your body reducing its own enzyme production. So from that perspective, I don't believe that there's a risk long term. Obviously, keep working with your doctor, keep checking your labs. You never know. But so far, it seems like mostly just benefit. And what people do notice, again, is usually a big bump in reduction of food sensitivities, reduction in bloating, and then a better stool consistency. So if you tend to be a little constipated or a little loose, you tend to be a little less of those issues. It's not like a fix for any of these things. It's not a drug. It's not a pharmaceutical. So it doesn't treat anything, but it just tends to help you absorb everything better. And therefore, what happens in the toilet part tends to go easier and better for you. And then oftentimes people end up finding better energy. And then if they're tracking their blood glucose, they can typically see some better numbers or better support there as well.
Okay. That's certainly a big issue. Blood sugar, insulin resistance, et cetera. Yeah, that's a big benefit. What else, Stephen?
Yeah, I just think that, like, if you're having brain issues, then and you've tried, like, you've tried Be Serene, you've tried like various other protocols, and you just aren't getting anywhere, then I would turn to the gut next, and then probably hormones after that. And you can do those all concurrently if you're working with someone like Dr. Camp or someone else who knows what they're doing. But they're so correlated between the two. Like, if you're having issues in one area, it's pretty much guaranteed for you to be having issues in the other area. And so it's one thing to take probiotics and prebiotics and things like that. Those aren't bad, but they're not going to structurally change how you absorb and break down your foods. That's just not what they do. And so I think the foundation of proper gut health starts in your stomach and starts with your enzymes. If you can nail those two things along with a decent diet, I'm not like, unless you have celiac disease or unless you have a true histamine issue where you can't even touch a certain type of food, there's definitely a lot of people like that. If you're more moderate at this point, I don't think you need to be, 100% restrictive. If you have proper acid and proper enzymes, but most people don't. So therefore they do need to be 100% strict. And then I would say the last thing is, if your microbiome is wrecked or dysbiotic due to antibiotic use, due to the diet you've been eating, who knows what, but there is a strong correlation between microbiome disturbance and depression, anxiety. Anything you can do to rebuild that microbiome, I think the stronger your brain resiliency is going to be long term.
Yeah, I think that research in the near future will prove you right there, Stephen. The compounds, there's so much the symbiosis between our microbiome and our own body, and I think we're at just the beginning of starting to understand all the nutrients that are actually being produced in our intestinal tract and the influences those have both positively and negatively on our brain. The dysbiotic the chemicals that are products of dysbiosis that contribute to anxiety and depression on one hand, and then the vitamins and nutrients that are being produced also by the microbiome. Yeah, a very good point. Stephen, do you have any other tips, in your in your long and winding history with experience with GI health and, running a big business, which is stressful, I'm sure, and you have a lot on your plate. And yeah, so just some tips that you might have for our listeners, some pro tips, that you found that might help people in their ongoing, struggle with their digestive health and mood disorders. Yeah, would appreciate hearing some of those from you.
Yeah, sure. So number one, if you've never tried like a combo of 5-HTP and L-tyrosine, that was really helpful for me back in the day. If I ever do get extremely run down, I always have a little bit in the house, and I might take it for a few days just to kind of boost myself back up. So I'm a big believer in the 5-HTP L-tyrosine protocols. If your estrogen is too low or your progesterone is tanked out, you're going to be experiencing mood disturbances. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And you could be 30, you could be 50 or 80, and you can have like real issues if your estrogen is out of balance. So I would really check into that. Personally, NAD plus IVs, NAD IVs and injections were hugely beneficial for me. So if you have access to those, I think they work with almost any. I don't actually know if there's any risk factors, but they seem to be highly important. I personally think doing the work, like you can do all the chemical and physical work around supplements and lifestyle and nutrients, and are you getting sunlight in your eyes, and like, are you doing all these things? But if you don't do the extra emotional trauma work, like where you actually go to therapy, you're not going to get yourself out of this. So I think it's total bullshit to people that are like, hey, you can just go to therapy and you'll figure out why you're depressed or why you're anxious or what's happening. But they totally disregard all the physiology and all the diet and all the exercise and everything. And then I think it's total crap to go the other way and just say, well, supplements and vitamins and things like this and whatnot, we can fix all that other stuff. No, that's not true. It's both and. And so I think if you haven't done the work to go to therapy and just start to find out, what are your triggers, what are your patterns, what gets you there. If you haven't done that work, I would highly consider that, because that was extremely helpful for me to just get another person's objective reflection around like, okay, well, it seems like for one thing, for me, if I don't exercise, I can easily start to slip. I can either get more anxious or get a little depressed. But I didn't really know how strong that correlation was until I was seeing someone on a weekly basis and talking about like, wow, I feel like I'm anxious this week. And they're like, well, didn't you hurt your shoulder and you're not going to jiu-jitsu anymore? I was like, oh yeah, I'm not exercising because I have this injury. And they're like, well, maybe you should walk 5 miles because you can't do your exercise routine. Like, go do something different that you can do. And so that kind of like objective awareness is actually really difficult for a human to do on itself. And so I really would encourage people to do that kind of work. And then I think, the proper psychedelic assisted therapy, like if you can do it above board with ketamine, which is most widely available at the moment, use a referral if you can, do a lot of due diligence. But I think that there is some beautiful things that can be unlocked through ketamine therapy and the other therapies, MDMA, when it becomes legal, and psilocybin and other ones. But at least ketamine, I like to say to people, it's kind of like when you cycle the power to your phone or your computer, like your computer's acting up, you're like, and so you just turn it off and you turn it back on. Well, in a way, ketamine is powering down your default mode network and powering it back on. And, is this a perfect fix for everybody? No, it's not. But it does objectively increase the range in which your nervous system can move, and your default mode network may be stuck a little too high or maybe stuck a little too low. And doing something like a 6-pack of ketamine injections can help reset your set point about how you experience life. And so I think, depending on where you are, there's no shortcut here. You're probably going to have to touch on each one of these areas. If this has been a significant struggle for you, at least it has been for me, each one of the components added a piece or taught me something important about the next step in my journey. And so I think if you can also shift this from I'm damaged, I'm messed up, to this is my journey in life, and how interesting could this be? How could I turn this into a gift for my family, for my children, for my friends? How could I give back by being a guinea pig and figuring out myself? I think just shifting the perspective can also really just help your journey, whether you never do any of the stuff we talk about today and you just take B-Serene and you feel good, or you go deep, deep, deep down the rabbit hole like Dr. Camp and I have.
Beautiful, Stephen. Yeah, that's the gift of the wounded healer, right? And you really touched on it there, and there's an art of being a guinea pig, right? I get some clients who, they use that term in a derogatory sense, and others are more accepting of it and welcoming of it, with the idea that we're in a new era now, and right, that we're exploring what it means to be in this body and pushing the limits of what it means to be in this body. And as we do so, who do we have to guide us but ourselves in our own experience with our environment?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but 70 years ago, if you had a major depressive or anxiety disorder, they would just shock the hell out of your brain probably, and you'd end up in some sort of penitentiary, just drooling, or you just probably commit suicide, unfortunately. So it's only been the last 50 to 60 years where you're right. We've been able to really look at, how do we heal these bodies? How do we put them back together? How do we live in rhythm with our nervous system? Maybe it's wired a little, towards anxiety, or wired a little towards depression, but how can we accept that and make the best of it? And I think that's actually very exciting to be living right now, and being able to have access to what we do now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't imagine what it would be like to try to help people without access to the tests that I have now and the treatments that I have now, because I can pull from so many different toolboxes, and you need all of them. So it's like I'm always wanting more and more and more. It sounds like you're the same, and that's a big component of the healing journey. And I've repeated this to many of my clients over the years, and we're just to reiterate what you said, is that every digestive issue has some emotional and psychological component. And for some of us, it's 5%, and for some of it's 95% of the actual issue. And there's really no way to know but to dive in, get exactly like you said, get some therapy, get someone working on the emotional, psychological level, and explore different options. And there's so many different ones in our world to explore. So thank you for sharing more of your journey, Stephen. Yeah, very inspiring. Thank you for your work. Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope it helps somebody.
Absolutely. Helping lots of people. I know personally.
The last thing I'll end with, I guess, at this point, is that I do take my B-Serene. I take usually one per day, near dinner time, kind of help me wind down, especially right now at the hotel here. I might end up taking more the next couple of weeks. And then also we have a new product called HoloImmune, which works on a sort of a it's like the gut immune neuro sort of triangle. And so it helps create a better, a smarter gut immune linkage. And for some people, it seems to be about 30% of our customers so far, there's a neuro component. Like there appears to be inflammation coming out of the gut immune that's directly tied to a neuro connection. And so for some people who are struggling with like brain fog or brain disturbances, they may want to try, you can use herbs and things like B-Serene, which I totally use when needed, but you may also want to try other immune modulators to see if that will also help. And so that's where I might recommend giving HoloImmune a shot, just to see if you're one of those people that has a neuro gut linkage that might be supported by a product like that.
Yeah, that's exciting, Stephen. Would love to hear more about that. Perhaps we can come back and have another talk about your HoloImmune product sometime. That'd be great. love to learn more about that. And I'm sure my listeners would as well. And I would like to ask you just close with a few very practical questions on HoloZyme and HCL Guard.
Okay.
One, what's the ideal dosing of each? And two, what's the ideal trial period of each to know if it's working or if the dosing is right, et cetera? Like how long does it take, on the very practical level to know if it's working or not working?
So really practical level is like 1 to 2 weeks. Like if it's not working in 1 to 2 weeks, you should email us at support@healthygut, talk to your physician or whatever, because like when you get these things right, it's like a light switch, like it immediately has benefit. So now therapeutically, you'll probably want to be on them for 3 to 6 months or longer so that you rebuild your nutrient base and the things that have been low for a long time. So feeling it should take 1 to 2 weeks, but actually using it's probably going to be, 3 months to a year or longer as you rebuild your body. Dosage for HoloZymes, most people take 2 per meal. If you have a really bad case of a gut with a lot of bloating, some people take 4, up to 6 for people who have tried everything in the world, nothing's working. But it all kind of just depends on symptomology. So I really want to enable people to listen to their bodies, take some responsibility here and figure out maybe it's 3 per meal, and 3 per meal, you feel great. You have a perfect Bristol number 4 in the toilet every day, and you can eat, broccoli without farting. So that's great. So 3 is your dosage. Other people, it'll be 2, some people will be 1, things like that. With HCL Guard, I do recommend people do the HCL challenge with that, which is basically an escalation dosage over as many days as it takes you to find basically a burn or loose stools. And then you take 1 less pill. So let's say on day 7, you're at like 6 pills or something, and you have some heartburn or something like that. You'll take some baking soda, it'll neutralize the burn. And then instead of taking 6, you'll take 5 from there on out. And so again, most people take HCL Guard for many months. And then at some point they start noticing like, hey, I think I can take 4, and they'll start taking a little less, and they'll start taking a little less. And then, a few weeks later, they may be down to 2 per meal, and then just kind of wean off of it. There seems to be some sort of way in which it sort of helps retrain the stomach's capacity to create acid and sustain acid production. Dr. Jonathan Wright talks about it in Why Stomach Acid is Good for You, that book. So if you want more info, start there. But at the end of the day, most people taking HCL Guard are between 2 and 4 per meal, and most HoloZyme users are between 2 and 4 per meal as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I love that book. That's how I learned about the topic some 20 years ago. Dr. Jonathan Wright talks all about that. And good read for anybody who wants more detail. And Stephen, I think you also have a support page on Facebook also for people that have questions or need more support, correct?
Yeah. So all customers get invited to our Facebook support group. It's only for customers. And we have a health coach on our team who's in there answering questions. I pop in there and answer questions. So our goal is to make sure you're totally supported. And if it's not working for you, we want to give you a money back. Like we're not, there's a lot of things you could spend your money on. We just talked about a bunch of them, from herbs to immune support to estrogen, like NAD. There's like a lot of ways in which you can get your needs met. So if HCL Guard or HoloZymes doesn't work for you, number 1, we want to try to help you with your dosing in case it's off. And then number 2, we'd like to give you your money back so you can go apply that money somewhere else. So we really try to pride ourselves as a company that gives the best support in the world.
Beautiful. Thanks. And as part of this video, we'll have a promo. I think it's $15 off per bottle of each of those. Those will be coming on the emails, and we'll put those in the comments below as well. And sorry we didn't get this on Facebook Live, but we'll have it recorded and get you the information, and I'll have a follow-up recording for any questions that are asked as well. So thank you, Stephen. Really appreciate your time today. Really appreciate your time and your experience sharing it with us and your passion for this topic. So it's such a needed, it's such a large problem in our country now. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kemp. And you can go to healthygut.com I think Dr. Morgan Camp, and that will take you to the $15 off and free US shipping. So if you have any questions about that, you can also just email us at support@healthygut.
Beautiful. Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Thanks.